Okay, welcome back from our break. I hope you all were able to get, my preference is sun drop, but something to drink and on our break so we can kind of going into the dinner hour tonight. Next up, of course, we have Cabarrus County Schools. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us. And I'm going to let, since you have a big entourage back there, Chairman Shue, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce your board members that are here and staff members that are here also.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thank you all for letting us come give you our annual request. And this evening I have with me, of course, Dr. Shepard, our superintendent. We got Kelly Klutz, our chief financial officer, and I got 4 of my board members back there, Barry Shoemaker and Carolyn Carpenter, Jeff Phillips and David Harrison. And we got some of the administrative staff here as well. We have Kathy Auger, our Human Resources Director. We got Aline, our board clerk. And we have Chris Louder, administrative staff, and Jason Van Huckelen, administrative staff. Hope I didn't leave anybody out. Oh, Mr. Wiki, we can't leave him out. You know, he's our Director of Facilities, and we're glad to have all of you, and we appreciate the support being here with us this evening. And here just in a minute or two, Dr. Shepard has a few things to say, and then Ms. Klutz will get right on into the budget request. But once again, thank you all for taking your time out to listen to our request, not only ours, but all the others departments in Cabarrus County before you make your budget decisions here coming up sometime soon. So with that being said, Dr. Shepard, whatever you have to say, then we'll move on to Ms. Klutz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Ms. Poole and members of the commission the opportunity to come and talk with you tonight about our budget request. The second slide there will show you that we had a lot of wonderful minds and beautiful faces working on this this budget that we then presented to our commissioners and then I think submitted to you guys mid-April. The next slide will show you that the budget committee was expanded to represent or include a number of new people and new perspectives, but 2 that I want to single out would be that of Ann and Parth, who were very much so part of our discussions in our committee and helped us understand the county perspective, and hopefully they understood a little bit of the school system perspective. Parth gets a gold star. He made every meeting, so we appreciate that very much. The committees, the 52 subcommittees you see there representing every department, every school in the school system, put together their needs, led by the various directors, and submitted that to our 25-member budget committee. And what you'll hear tonight are the overwhelming needs of your county school system. In the 6 weeks since our presentation to the Board of Education and submission of the document to our county staff, several things have changed, very similar to what you were told probably from Kannapolis, that things are happening pretty fast in Raleigh right now. The anticipated salary increases that we were all hoping for waned. And since we have 2/3 of a state budget right now, we have the governor's budget, the Senate's budget, and looking forward to seeing what the House has to say. But that's created deficits that we knew nothing about when we were creating this budget. And we'll address those changes as we walk through the document a little bit later. But before we go into the details of the budget, the last few years I've given you a perspective from the Public School Forum, how they've compared school district to school district and what have you. And we went a different route this year, mainly because the Public School Forum didn't release their document until last week and we got it today. So we put together sort of our own numbers. When I think about school systems that are comparable to Cabarrus County, I think of Union County. So we looked at Union County to see how funding is going there. And you can see by that record, state funding, they had the honor of being less. We've bragged for years about being 115 of 115. Well, Union County finally dipped below us last year, or 11-12. We did a little bit better. You can see the big differences in the local per pupil expenditure. And that figure far out to the right on the top there shows that if we were funded at the same level as Union County schools, then we would have an additional $18 million to spend on our children here in Cabarrus County. So we need your help and we don't want to be like our neighbors to the southwest. We just want to be like our neighbors to the south. We never hope to have the same kind of support that Charlotte Met gets, because it's just a different world there. But Union's very similar to us, so we paid a lot of attention to that. The next slide shows more of the same. We can go on one more. Then we did a comparison. You know, our vision for our school district has been, since I've started talking with you 5 years ago, has been to be one of the top 10 school districts in the state. In many ways we are, but in many ways we're not. So we listed what we thought by EOC and EOG scores, the top 10 districts in the state. And then you can see our numbers are there at the bottom underneath that, our funding numbers. And when you look at state funding, because we did have a better year with the state last year, you can see at the bottom there, number 7, Cabarrus County, we're sort of in the middle of the pack in funding. But on the next slide, you'll see that when you start comparing local funding, you can see that we don't fare quite as well. And the same thing is true at the bottom with state funding. Now, we're appreciative of everything that you've done for us. I think this process is a little bit backwards. I explained this to Mike when we met a few weeks ago. We've got a ton of needs that we're going to present to you tonight. But the county manager's budget that he's presented to you does include increases for our school system, and we're very thankful for those. But I think we would be wrong not to tell you all of our needs as we can best articulate them. And as I said, some of the things have changed, salaries and those kinds of things. But when you see, if our goal is to be one of the very best school systems in the state, and it is, and I want to quickly get by that goal and get on to being one of the best in the nation, we're going to have to find a way to find more local funding. And we come here tonight to explain our needs and to humble ourselves and tell you that we want to work with you to find that way. The next slide, just comparisons we gave you earlier, and then I'll turn this over to Kelly. Back up one, please. Sure. You can see there that same figure. If we were to compare our funding with that, let's say, of Mooresville City Schools, and this is just the local funding, you can see that would provide us, if we were funded at the same per pupil level, that would be 166 additional teachers, and you can multiply that times 2.5 and get the number of teacher assistants that would generate. If you look at the bottom of that list, though, it is amazing at how well funded some school systems in the state are locally. I don't think we're not here tonight to ask you to fund us at the level of Asheville City, but no wonder things go as well as they do there. You can look, we could, if we had their funding, we'd have 2,100 additional teachers. I mean, to me, that's just amazing. I think that would just about double our teaching staff. But I appreciate the chance to present the information to you tonight. I'll turn it over to Kelly. She can present the details of the budget, and then we'll be glad to answer any questions you have. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight.
Thank you. We're going to move down 2 slides right here. So this is a summary of our budget request that we'll just walk through, give you a general idea of what our budget request is, and then we'll go into the detail. We've included 123 pages in our document presentation this year, and that is just due to the feedback that we've received from staff and commissioners in that you want us to be very transparent. We've strived to do that, give you as much information as you can possibly want. Certainly that's a lot of information for you to go through and comprehend, so we will certainly answer any questions that you have and refer you to the correct pages where we've given you detail. So on the first slide of our budget request, the first thing that we do, very much like Kannapolis City Schools, is we look at our continuation expenses, and those expenses are the things that we don't have control over. We're going to operate at the same level, but it's going to cost us more. It's basically like a cost of living adjustment. So things like retirement for our current employees is going to increase from 14.23 to 14.459% of their salary, and those are things that we have to take care of, those costs associated with that. There's also a health insurance increase on the employer side that we have to take care of, those costs. And then in the detail of this, you're going to see that Duke Power is anticipating a rate increase. And so those are kind of things that we have to build into this line item for continuation expense. Again, we're not increasing anything, we're not doing anything different, we're operating the same, but we anticipate it costing us $1.2 million to continue to operate in the same manner that we currently are. The next line item would be the expansion budget, and so these things would be in and above what we currently do, and there's $5.6 million of requests there, and we'll go through the detail. Much of that is the salary study. That's the biggest component. Charter school allocation, I want to spend some time on that when we get there. I've indicated $1.1 million for that request. We are a pass-through for the charter school. We take the money that the county locally gives us and we pass it through to the charter school, and that's going to have a really big impact on us this year, so I want you to know the details of that. Special Olympics, we request that separately because it's a contractual agreement that you guys honor. It's a small amount. Facilities and operations, we have details on those requests, total of $1.5 million for various different things as staff and the increases that we mentioned for continuing operation, and we'll go over those in addition. Our technology request is separate per the request of the county, pulling it from a lot of that from capital into a technology line item, and we'll review those details. And then the final one is our capital outlay, and we've categorized those this year in two line items. One that has a return on our investment within 5 years. We think those are just those make a lot of business sense to go ahead and tackle those. And then we have the capital projects that we just need. So those are listed. The total request is clearly $22 million. We know that that is a huge number, and we're not expecting to leave the table with that amount. So the next document is it's a different look of the same request. We break it down by per pupil. We take it from current year budget, adopted budget, and we increase it. We show the increase so that it matches the request. I'll note at the bottom of this document is 21,757,000, and the bottom of the other document is 22,777,000. It's the difference of $1,020,000. The reason that is because we can't request an increase for capital. We request the total amount. So that's where the variance is on local and facilities. We're just asking for the increase. For capital, we go back to zero because it's not a continuing guaranteed amount. So that's the variance. Okay. And so this is where we'll start into the detail of our budget request. I'll note at the top there's a state projection for Cabarrus County Schools at 30,743 students. Our current ADM is the better of the first or the second month of the current year, and we are at 29,972, and that's what our funding is based on at the state level. That's an expected growth of 771 students coming into our system. That does not account for the charter schools. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So I'll draw your attention down to the continuation items, and we'll start with the line 1. Those are the continuation items where if the state were to adopt a pay increase for staff, we would want to match the locally paid staff with that amount. We were at 1% when we presented this budget to our board. Then now the governor's, the Senate's version has no increase. But our board wanted to include a 2.5% increase as a placeholder. So again, we're like Kannapolis City Schools. We do not know what's in our future, but as soon as we do, we'll certainly let you know. The next item, the first item is for supplements. The second item is for the locally paid staff, the pay increase. The third item is the increase in utility costs. So when we were in budget committee at the time, we knew to expect a 9.6% increase from Duke Power on our utility costs. Knowing that our utility costs are $5 million, that's a significant amount of impact to our budget. So we would anticipate a $480,000 increase just to pay the utility bill. And again, we don't get anything more for it. It's just something that we expect to happen. We do have a solution for you, though. It would require capital outlay funds. We could return those dollars that we invested back into our energy bill, and it would negate these costs if you chose to invest in our capital funds. Then 4, 5, and 6 are just those normal costs that increase in costs that I just mentioned, retirement costs, hospitalization costs, and then there is a change in the unemployment cost and the way that we will operate in the future, and that bill has passed, so we know that that is for sure. So that will be a real cost that we have to expense. Okay. So the next category that we'll go through are our expansion requests. We have requested to provide supplements for assistant athletic directors. We currently have those positions in our systems, but they're paid by our boosters. And we also have a justification document included if you'd like to read more about that. It's an equity issue, and we feel like we need to include that position as a supplement. Then the next item is the results of our salary study. And we've included about 3 or 4 pages of documentation. Page 39 through 42 is documentation that tells you about the results of our salary study. And we certainly would like to present the results of that study to you at a different time. Line item number 9 is a provision to increase teaching staff. And this would allow us to increase teacher planning time in our elementary schools. Currently, there is I hate to use the word inequity, but I think that's proper. The proper word is there is more planning time in middle schools and high schools than there currently is in elementary schools, and we feel that they need the proper planning time. And again, there's justification documents for each of these items. The last expansion item would be a provision to return an instructional supply allotment to the 2008-2009 levels. So we are currently operating on $1.4 million less instructional supplies than we did back in 2008 and 2009. We glanced at a survey today in Cabinet, and it indicated that teachers feel they do not have adequate supplies to do their jobs, and we're aware of that. Okay. So the next line item is the request for charter schools, and I'm going to turn back to my detail on the charter schools, and that starts on page 48. And I'm sorry to jump over Parth.
No, it's fine. For us, it's on page.
Oh, I'm sorry. There you are. Okay.
Page 79.
So what we do with charter schools is when we start planning our budget, we need to know how many students are going to go to a charter school. Because again, we pass those local dollars from us to the charter school. So when I start looking at our budget presentation, I literally call each charter school and ask them, what is your anticipated enrollment for the next coming year? And they gave me these numbers. So we currently have 431 students in those listed charter schools. And when I called the charter schools for 13-14 projections, they told me that 1,184 students would be attending the charter schools. I felt like it was a mistake, so I asked them to check it 2 or 3 times. What you'll see, if you look at the data, is that the Cabarrus Charter Academy is the significant amount of that increase. So out of 753 students that will be going to charter schools, 594 are reflected in the Cabarrus Charter Academy. We now know, at the time that we did this, their capacity was 660 students. They have requested from DPI to increase their capacity to 882. And if granted that capacity, that's going to impact us more than what is reflected here on this document. Okay. The idea, I believe, your county manager has proposed a flat budget amount for Cabarrus County Schools. I think it's important for you to know, and we appreciate, actually there was an increase with the technology and the capital, but on the operating side, when we are expecting a flat number and we're increasing students, what's going to happen is I'm now going to be responsible for sending 753 times the local portion of per pupil allocation to these charter schools. What's going to happen is we're going to need to cut somewhere in order to make that happen, and I'm legally responsible to move those dollars over. So I understand the goal of keeping us flat and would appreciate being flat or with the increases that we talked about. But knowing that the charter school is in town, we are literally going to have to move over a million one more than we currently do at this moment. Okay. All right.
Do we flip back?
Yes, please. And the Special Olympics, that's just contractual, and we'll move over that. So this is, as we were anticipating our budget back in January, February, we were believing that we weren't going to receive cuts from the state, and we were expecting to be able to fund these few items through state expansion dollars. We currently do not know our fate from the state, so we're unsure of what will happen with these items, but these were the ones that we would like to fund with state funds, assuming we did not receive a cut, but we would receive expansion dollars. Okay. So the next document that you have is a summary of our facilities and operations budget request. We have the more extensive detailed version that we're used to sending over to your office, and it has is very detailed. Most of our budget committee were not happy with that format, so we tried to simplify it so that we could get exactly what we were requesting. So the priority one is simply the same as what we did in the local continuation budget, in that we're requesting a salary increase to match any state increase. That's all that it is. Line item 2 is an increase in repair budgets. There's been significant things that would cause rising prices, additional requirements and mandates, and those types of things that Mr. Whitkey has experienced and feels that we need to increase the maintenance budget. There's also the very specific items that are listed below. We would like to increase the high school field maintenance for increased use, and that would be $105,000. Then you have the custodial equipment, same as Kannapolis City Schools. The equipment is not inexpensive, but it certainly ages and needs to be replaced. You have vehicle replacement, stormwater replacement. I would encourage you to read those justifications, and it indicates the mileage and the use on those vehicles. They're extremely used. Number 3 is our additional request for staff. And again, I would encourage you to read those justifications, in that it's very difficult for a system our size to keep up with all of our maintenance needs, and additional staff would certainly help with that task. If we were to receive additional staff, we would need new vehicles for those positions. And then below, it's the balancing, so that we're all transparent and we know exactly where the money's coming and going. Okay. So in the maintenance budget, there's a component of capital projects that we've always presented in detail to our board and to your board, and what we have indicated that's highlighted would be the items that we are recommending that we fund this next year, 13-14, and that would be with funds that you already give us. We're not asking for additional funds for this list. The same with the next list would be our grounds projects. It's funds that you already give us, and those are the items that we listed as priority, and we would fund with 13-14 funds. Okay. Our technology request, again, we have some we have some archiving and filing needs. That's just getting 21st century. We have unbelievable amount of files stored that we certainly need to archive. Digitizing the records is also very similar to that, but it's a component of the archiving of the files. And then if we want to be on a 4-year renewal cycle for our computers, it would take $4 million to currently renew the devices that we have in our system. We understand that that's a large amount. It certainly could be, financing could be done any way that you want. We do currently have a lease. We didn't want to imply that the financing on anything, so we just put the gross amount that it would require to get us. But if we want our students to have a computer or a device in front of them that is 4 years or less, then this is the amount of money that it would take. Currently, ours are significantly older. Some of them are significantly older than that. We do have some new ones. Also, if we were going to renew the machines that quickly, we feel like we need additional technicians to support our endpoint devices. Okay. And so now we'll talk about capital. The items at the top of the document are the items that have a return on investment. And so the large cafeteria equipment, child nutrition, these, if you'll read the justification, they're significantly old, and they will save us in energy usage, not to mention the ease of use and all those other things. But the energy use in itself would pay for itself less than 5 years. This lighting change out for manufacturing regulatory changes, it's a phase out, and we could phase it in. It's a phase out of the lighting, but you could phase this project. You wouldn't have to fund $2.5 million in the same year. You could do it over 3 years or whatever your funding was available. But this is the line item that would generate the return on investment and would get that $480,000 back into the system, so that there would not be a need to pay the utility company the increased cost. We could just generate that savings here with this investment, this 2.5 investment. And I don't want you to have to go back to the, but I'm going to ask you to, Par. On page, it's my page 31. It's a couple pages back, and I'll stop you when you get there.
Right here.
Right there, yes. So this is the return on investment for the projects that we're asking for up top, and it summarizes the energy savings. So,
62.
I'm sorry. 62. So over 3 years, we would see that the dish machines would save us $240,000. On the, sorry, sorry, that's correct, $240,000. On the T12 lighting phase out, within 4 years, we would save $2.8 million more than we've invested in the initial 3 years or the first year. The metal halide lights, we could return $422,000. So if you're looking at the bottom of that document, our electric costs are $5 million. We're estimating a 9% increase, which would be $480,000. And with those 3 items would return more than the $480,000 increase that we would need to expend for utility increases. So we feel strongly about the items that are listed at the top of the document. And then the items at the separate section are items that we believe are the most concerning and the most urgent. Per your instruction, we've worked with staff on our other capital needs, and certainly it's a lot more than the $5 million or the $9 million in total. I'm sorry, Parth. Thank you.
Hang on, we'll catch you.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you.
Page 55.
Page 55, if that's the correct page.
It is. And so things like roofs and security systems for the buses, just as Kannapolis City Schools mentioned, they are integral to our operations and the safety and security of our students. There's additional roofs and activity buses that are listed. Part of the Senate's budget is that they would increase the renewal cycle from $200,000 to $250,000 on the buses. So that in itself is going to increase our transportation budget, repair costs, and all the things that go along with that if that passes. And that's a sidebar, but our activity buses are older than the state-run yellow buses. So if that gives you any indication, a lot of them are. So we also have the same type of concerns with our furniture for our schools, but I want to call your attention to the security vestibules for the high school and middle schools. We've been able to fund the elementary school vestibules. Some of the elementary schools had vestibules in them, some of the middle schools and some of the high schools, but this would be all remaining middle school and high schools that did not currently have a vestibule in it. Okay. Mobile units, we have a significant number of mobile units that Cabarrus County Schools owns, and they are some of them are extremely old. The intention was never to own and maintain them as permanent structure. It was to, as the influx of students came in, we were to house the mobile units and then eventually remove and take and build a school. But we've retained mobile units for longer than their expected life, and we feel like we need to replace those units. I won't read every line item to you, but I'll certainly take questions. We are at the end of the request. The justifications are behind, and we'll entertain any questions or comments that you have at this point.
I have one quick question before we get too far into it. Under the recommended items on the page we were just on, it says band instruments. In sixth grade, do the students pay for their own instruments, or?
Do you want to answer that?
Or what is that?
Some of the instruments they do, but the more expensive ones they don't. We have held band in 7th and 8th grade,
Right.
So it takes more instruments to do the background work on the 6th grade students. So
Okay.
that's
I just remember when I was in school, we paid for our instruments.
well, you bought your flute, but you didn't buy your tuba.
Oh, okay.
You didn't buy the
I
timpani. You know, those kinds of
Played the
things.
trombone.
Right.
Other questions, commissioners?
You talked about savings on lighting. You changed these lights out to LED lighting?
No, Mr. Burge, at this point, we're looking at, the driving force behind this is the elimination of the T12 bulb. And so we're.
You going to T8 or T5?
Which is,
You need to be at a microphone.
Excuse me, yeah. I want to make sure before. Thank you, yes. We're going with a T8. We've been looking at the T5s. At this time, we've been concerned about, we've talked to some counties that have gone with T5s, and they've been having problems with lenses and overheating of those fixtures. The T8s seem to work well. They have a very good payback on them, and we are starting with using them in gymnasiums. We've done some replacements in classrooms, and those have been successful. The nice thing about the wattage bulbs is there's a substantial savings per bulb, and we also require less number of fixtures in the classroom or the gymnasium to light it effectively. So that's where the savings is. At the very beginning of this analysis, when we looked at T5s, we were actually being told by some of the folks who manufacture those that they would not recommend that investment, and they would eventually recommend the LEDs. We just aren't at a point where they're financially
Too costly.
too costly at this point.
Have you tried any of the LEDs, though? in the
We
school
just
system?
put, excuse me, yes, sir.
And the
We-
4-foot lamps, have you tried them?
No, not yet, not
Okay.
the 4-foots. We tried some spots, and
And that's the way with the future, though. That's what it's all going to before it's over with.
I
And
would
there's,
agree
and
with
there's
you.
a whole lot of savings there. I don't know whether there's enough for payback or not, but it should be. But I know you don't have the money to spend right now to do the LEDs,
That's the reality of it, yes.
which would be would be a lot bigger savings to use the LEDs than it would to use the T8s. And you'd actually save more money in the long run and get payback on it for the life of the LEDs.
I think what we can do is look at that, that option. The difficulty that we have is this window of, that's closing on the T12 availability. And I think we're going to be sort of caught as the window's closing if we don't move quickly on this.
Well, all the last built schools that was built, didn't they put T8s in them?
Yes.
They didn't put T12s in
No,
those?
sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Wiki, in regards to the lighting, there was several federal grants, I believe, a couple of years ago. How many grants did the school system apply for when they were available a couple of years ago to do this replacement?
I know we did a few. I know we have done some, we've gotten the benefit of some Duke rebates in terms of replacements as well. What we found out a little bit too late, for example, with the new construction was you had to apply for the programs before the construction was even begun. And so it was sort of, the horse was out of the barn when we found that out. And that was during the time that we were hiring the energy manager. So we became quite knowledgeable once he became an employee. But up until that time, we weren't aware of that. We weren't made aware of it. And so I do know that we have gotten some, I don't have those figures in front of me, but we have gotten some grant monies. And we have gotten, because that's, I believe, how we did some of the classroom replacements. And then we've also gotten Duke incentives, and we're using the funds school by school. So they return, let's say, an incentive per a school. We'll use those funds to help that particular school with the replacement system in their classrooms or in the hallways.
On these return on investment projects,
Yes, sir.
was an analysis performed so that the return on investment, a percentage of the return on the investment, would actually pay for the refurbishing? And what I mean by the simplest way to use it is it's $2.5 million. If was an analysis done that says if you invest $500,000, the savings of that $500,000 would pay for the next investment.
I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Has that analysis been run?
I can't say that we've done it in that term. We simply looked at it in terms of, what the increase will be, as Kelly mentioned, in terms of the increase in utility costs, and we were focusing on that. We certainly could look at it in light of, if we spent X amount of dollars this year, could that help then fund the amount necessary for next year's replacement? As I said, the key for us is a window of time, but that's certainly a calculation that we can run and get back to you on.
Or just think through it, because I'm not certain that is the best way to approach it, but, and I don't think it's going to be an equally proportionate investment. In my mind, I don't think you can do an equal investment and pay for itself. It's got to be a larger investment at the beginning
Initially.
to flip it. Now, I don't know if it's 70, 20, 10, or what the percentages are, but I think there's a number there that we'd actually maximize our dollars by, in that manner. I'm just thinking.
I would agree with you. I think there's a possibility that that's very true.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for Mr. Whitkey. Okay. Mrs. Clutch, you're talking about a 2.5% increase, but I don't remember seeing anywhere in the governor's budget or any budget that warrants a 2.5% increase. And the first presentation that I was able to try and find to get prepared for today's meeting was actually requesting a 5%. Can you help me understand where I've never found 1% anywhere except in the highlighted portion of a presentation saying the state budget's 1%, but we're going to ask for 5.
So the governor's budget indicated a 5%.
It did.
It did, and I think I have those documents here and can provide that. So the governor's budget, and that was the earliest budget, initial information that we were working from. Then we received the Senate version, and it had 1%.
Okay. Because when I was looking at y'all's presentation that you had on y'all's website, it said just 1%. It never said 5%.
I'm sorry, I've got my versions. DPI's
Okay.
version comes out first. I was one version behind. The governor's had 1%, and the Senate has 0%.
Okay.
So that's where those numbers come from. Again, we're just working with information that's just very early in the stages. And so our board decided that they felt we should represent a 2.5% going from the 1 to the 5, go to the middle of that, somewhat the middle of that.
And I think the way you responded to that last year was the appropriate way. Let's just wait and find out what it is so we'll know what we're dealing with. But we had to put a figure in because this process starts much earlier than any of this accurate figures are available.
Okay. The one thing I didn't see, I couldn't find anywhere, is the Arts Council funding. Y'all fund the Arts Council, or it's a pass-through from the money we give to you. What's that amount?
I believe it's $40,000 that's currently budgeted in our line items.
40.
$30,000 for the dollar per student, and then there's $10,000 that we allocate for transportation costs for the schools to do.
Okay. And I think I heard you correctly, there is a retirement increase from 14 point ... to 14.5%?
5.9, I believe.
Okay.
14.23 to 14.59.
Okay, I want to make certain I heard that correctly. I think, Dr. Shepard, you mentioned that for every teacher, that accounts for 2.5 TAs?
When you're converting teacher assistant positions to teaching positions, which schools are allowed to do that, then that is the ratio, 1 to
Okay.
2.5.
If you're,
6 hours. Because of 6 hours.
I'm sorry?
It used to be 2 positions. The state would allow us to take 2 positions for a teacher position, but because we reduced our teacher assistant hours to 6 hours, now it takes 2.5 teacher assistants to convert to 1 teacher.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is in your budget, you're requesting 20 additional teachers, but you're cutting 94 teacher's assistant positions. 2 questions. Wouldn't it be a better use of the money at $1.1 million thereabouts to have 50 teacher assistants and not 20 teachers? Because we're talking about planning.
Right. Remember, the budget process for us started before the governor or the Senate, so what you're reading today is what we put together without knowing that there was going to be any cuts in teacher assistants. I think that's the bind that we will find ourselves in eventually, is making a choice between whether we want to fund teachers or whether we want to fund teacher assistants, whether we want to fund materials and supplies and those kinds of things. But
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is the teachers are a new positions that's requested, but their teacher assistants are people that are existing. I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is knowing now if the state legislature budget is similar to the Senate budget, wouldn't we get a better bang for our buck by keeping teacher assistants, the volume, as opposed to hiring new teachers?
yes.
Okay. And along that same line of thought, was the statement in the paper incorrect that the same amount of funding is being provided, but it's not being earmarked for teachers' assistants?
In which budget?
In the Senate budget.
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the Senate budget.
Okay.
I heard Will admit the same thing. We're not really sure where we're going to land with the overall budget, but the Senate took the discretionary reduction away, and then they made reductions on their own, and then they provided ultimate flexibility. So we really don't know what that means. that we'll be able to shift money from one pot to the other. But that's the state budget, and that'll be clearer hopefully in the next month to 6 weeks.
Okay, because that's, Senator Hartzell was saying that you had the same amount of money, it's just that you're given the freedom to choose how to spend it. Is that not true or accurate?
I would hate to say the senator didn't tell the truth. I don't know. Yeah,
He could have been misquoted. I mean,
Yeah, well,
I'm just trying to figure it out.
right.
If those positions, if that money is reinstated, does that mean that you're going to rescind the, I don't know what it's, the
Called a
RIF?
RIF, reduction in force.
Would that be rescinded?
Are
I
we talking about the
guess?
state budget now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, when the legislature, if the legislature puts that money back in.
If they put the money back in the budget, yes, we would,
Okay.
most definitely.
Okay. What would be the better way for us to deal with if we have the extra $1.1 million? Is it better to allocate it for teachers or teachers' assistants?
Well, I think that depends on the perspective. You got people that are losing jobs, and so it's always best to take care of your people when they're losing jobs. But if you want to look at from a security, safety perspective, the more people you have in the school building, the safer you are. If you want to look at it from an instructional perspective, you have trained teachers who are certified to do the work, so they're probably going to offer, instruction and more than someone who's not trained to do so. So it depends on which one you value. Academic achievement or safety. Certainly safety is a very important thing to us and our board.
Okay. Okay. And let's shift gears to technology. I wasn't clear in what I read, and I think that's on a purple page.
Page
54.
Yeah.
In regard, I thought, Mrs. Klutz, that you were talking about that replacement of the devices is through purchase?
This budget request would be a
Purchase?
replacement through purchase, yes.
Okay.
If you choose a funding mechanism.
I understand, because I was confused, because on the left-hand column it says annual computer lease. So,
Right, we started going down that road, but
Mhm.
during Budget Committee, we said, you know what, that's your decision. If you want to do a lease
Okay.
or whatever, so.
I just want to make certain, so that is a typo, or the $4 million in your mind is a purchase, not a lease.
So we indicated here in the last sentence, a lease option could be considered to minimize impact on immediate cash flow, so.
Would the lease option be $4 million? Because it would seem to me it would be substantially less.
Yeah, the lease option would be
Okay.
a much smaller option.
Okay.
I mean, a much smaller number.
In regards to the technology request, do you think it would be, is that somewhere where if we have the money, it's better, and this is for Mrs. Klutz or Dr. Shepard, is it better to look at the technology request separate from the potential teacher or teacher's assistance positions, or where do we, help us get some guidance?
I think, again, that's a matter of values, and I certainly see the need for technology in our classroom. If we're going to prepare students for the workforce and for college, you've got to have the most modern technology available. So I think it's all important, and that's why I was saying when I was stating earlier that we want to be one of the best school systems in the state. So we're going to have to find a way to have it all.
Well, I understand. I'm just trying to, I'm not on the Board of Education. I'm not an educator. I'm just trying to figure out, we've got a limited pot full of money. And with that limitation, if it comes down to X number of dollars for technology or teachers, what's the better place to put it? Or teachers' assistants?
Well, this budget request that our board has approved is to place that money in technology, but
Okay.
things have changed.
Okay.
So I'm not going to say that things are more important than people at any time. We've made very clear in the few years that we've been making cuts to the budget year after year, that we have protected people. The problem is that we're down to the point now where our things are so old and worn out, and our textbooks are out of date, and our instructional material supplies budget is zero. And our state is saying there's no more. It's, we're going to invest in K through 3 reading programs and what have you, no additional funds in those areas. So it's a very tough position to be in. I'm sure you appreciate that, but we've got some tough decisions to make.
Well, just to add to that, Commissioner White, I don't know whether you're aware of it or not, but in 2014, we're going to be required to do online testing, which requires a device. And currently, I don't know what the statistics are for Cabarrus County schools, whether it's 4-to-1, 3-to-1. You know, with our own funds, we purchased computers to try to bring that number down closer to a 1-to-1 in some schools. But in some schools, though, it's far from that. In our lower performing schools, we've increased the technology. But for the most part, though, the technology that we have is very aged. And, you know, when it comes down to affecting a small amount of people versus a large amount of people, then I think that, you know, the money, in my opinion, should be spent on technology, although not discrediting the TAs by no means, because they are a very valuable asset. But then again, if the state takes that away from us, then, you know, without funding, obviously it would have to come from the commissioners. And I see the predicament that you guys are in, fund technology or fund TAs. And, you know, it's a tough position for you to be in, and just like it is for us when it comes to trying to meet the needs of a growing school system. And you know, if we don't fund technology, we just get further behind, that's all. We just get further and further behind, and we're already behind the 8 ball already, and so we just keep getting further behind. And just like maintenance issues, as we've talked, you know, we just get further behind if we don't fund it and fix it.
I would call your attention, I'm not going to ask you to change pages, but on our justification page for this item, we've indicated the status of our current endpoints that are within 1 year. We have 1,000. These are not exact numbers, you can tell. 1 year, there's 1,000 of them. 2 to 4 years would be 9,000. Above 5 years and older, we have 6,000 devices. So we see that those 6,000 devices need to be replaced. That's 38% of our inventory are older than 4 years.
Let's see. When I was looking at the very beginning of your presentation in regards to comparing Cabarrus County to Mooresville, you're talking about an additional $9 million. They're actually one stage ahead of us, one position up. We're at 10, or we're at 11, they're at 10, I believe, is what I saw. Let me reference your page.
No, we're not 11. We're much further down the list.
It says,
We put ourselves on the same list with the top 10 to show the difference in funding.
so we're not 11?
No.
Okay. And where is this information available? Because when I was trying to find this information, I couldn't, you know, Google, as superior as it's supposed to be, was unable to locate it. The only thing I could locate is something called schooldigger.com, which ranks schools, and I couldn't verify whether that was valid information or not, although it purported to have 2011, 2012 DPI statistical data. I wasn't satisfied that is accurate.
Well, the book that they used to publish was called the Statistical Profile, but now they've stopped printing that book, and it's all online. And the Department of Public Instruction website and the Finance and Business Department has the statistical profile information in Chart 25 or Table 25 is where that information is for.
Okay. Let me see if that's all the questions I had. Okay. One, and I hate to get back to the teacher's assistants, but one thing that really bugs me about this is that I don't think that I've got a full grasp of the TAs in regards to what they do, because I've been blessed with 3 children that were never ECs. How does the TA, what's the role of a TA in an EC classroom? That may not be the right one. My question is, if you have a classroom that does not have EC children, I would think that the role of the TA there is different than an exceptional child. Help me understand that, because to me, when you're cutting a TA in an EC classroom, it's completely different than cutting a TA in a regular classroom, or a different or a non-EC classroom.
So sometimes the role of the teacher assistant in an EC classroom is a one-to-one, assigned to be with one child. It's if that's what the student's IEP suggests. Other times, it's available to help the teacher to follow the direction of the teacher if whatever she would direct the teacher assistant to do, and care for social, emotional needs as well as academic.
Okay, so that in some EC classrooms, you may have more than one TA? Is that?
If you had,
because based on the needs of those children?
yes, one-to-one, if you had a one-to-one situation with more than 1 or 2 children in the classroom, yes.
But in a non-EC classroom, you could have one TA or a half a TA that shares classrooms?
Yes.
Is that?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
One thing that I think the people whose money we are spending would be interested to know about, and I applaud you on the items, return on investment, and the things that we can see a payback. One of the things included on there are 10 vehicles for McKinney Vento. I don't think most people understand, and myself included, totally what that, first of all, how will that save us money? How will we get the return on investment? And what is that?
I'll give you the surface on that, and Kelly can give you the greater detail. Currently, when we have a child that's out of our district, McKinney Vento is a term that's used for the services for children who are homeless. And if a child lives in they live in Charlotte, but now they're located in our district, or vice versa, if they attend one of our schools, but they've moved to Charlotte and now they're homeless, we are required to transport them. Currently, we transport them with use of school buses. And that is a very inefficient way to drive a bus that far, and so what we're requesting are vehicles that would require less, keep newer, and a smaller vehicle to go pick up 1 or 2 students.
So what are the limitations as to how far we have to go to, if they're attending a Cabarrus County school and they have a residence in Cabarrus County and then they no longer do, and they're homeless, how far do we have to go to find them? Is there a limit on that?
I think we could certainly make decisions that are reasonable. We wouldn't travel hundreds of miles. You couldn't get a child to and from school in a reasonable amount of time. But I'm not sure if there's an exact mile limitation. We're over the county borders and back, in neighboring counties is where we're largely serving.
So you may be in South Charlotte bringing students to Cabarrus County. Is that the federal law?
Yes.
And so the payback will be from these more efficient vehicles rather than running school buses.
It is not efficient to drive a school bus down there.
I can certainly understand how that would be. We heard earlier about some of the services that the county IT department is providing for Kannapolis City Schools. Are there any savings to be realized into entering into that kind of an agreement with the county school system? Is that something that's been looked at?
We've studied that. We have entered into agreements in some areas, but I think there's a greater need maybe in the Kannapolis system. We have a full technology department. So we do partner with them, with the county office on many things, and they do meet with them monthly. I think I heard Will say that they meet on a weekly basis. We don't do that, but there's, I get regular reports on the good work that's going on when Kannapolis and Cabarrus and the county all meet together.
Right. Great. I think that's the questions I had, aside from the fact that that people should know that the county commissioners have not eliminated any teacher assistant positions, contrary to the many emails I receive every day. But I certainly see that as a serious issue and understand what's going on.
And that is this is an opportunity to make sure that folks are clear that that is a issue with the governor's office and with the Senate, and we'll find out whether it's an issue with the House very soon and with the conferees. Hopefully, all the funds will be returned and we won't have that issue.
I like your positive attitude.
Optimism.
Commissioner Morris, I want to add just one comment to Dr. Shepherd's about the McKinto Venti. I don't know exactly what the number is now, but it's upward of 300 homeless children in Cabarrus County. Now, what number that we have to go pick up, some Mecklenburg County, some Gaston County, some Rowan, wherever they might be, we have to go get them. It's a federal law. But it's upwards of 350, somewhere thereabout in Cabarrus County, whereas in Mecklenburg, it's probably 5,000 or better, homeless children.
And that's a horrible situation.
It is.
You know, but I'm not sure that's the most efficient way to handle it, and so I felt like it was
Man's
important
ahead.
for the public to understand that that was one of the things that you have to deal with regularly.
Why do the school districts, if they're in Mecklenburg, why does Mecklenburg not pick them up?
Well,
Are they assigned to Cabarrus?
if they live here, but they're
Moved.
evicted from their home and now they're
They're
living-
homeless.
Right, and they're living in the Charlotte area, then we are with a relative, or, I'm not sure the exact definition, but it's, you know, if you're living with a friend and they're
Okay.
home, then you're considered homeless. So
They
if you're,
they may not be homeless, but
right,
there are some homeless children in Cabarrus County,
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Many.
which is a shame
And
and a disgrace.
the school, this in Cabarrus County school system is considered their home school. And so wherever they might be, they call them couch surfers
Yeah.
for the modern day term, couch surfers, wherever they might be, a friend, aunt, uncle, that type thing.
And
But
y'all
we
use-
have to
y'all-
bus them to the home school.
Y'all
which is
use a school bus now to go pick them up.
Right. And
Not
so the
very
vans
efficient, is
would, the vans would reduce that drastically.
It will also help provide a better service to the students. So some of these students are on the bus a significant amount of time, but if we're able to incorporate these vehicles, we can reduce the amount of time that they're on a bus or in transportation.
Right.
And it'll be a better service to the student.
Now, you said you had 6,000 devices that was 5 years old. Aren't they're obsolete for one and wore out for number two, right?
5 years or greater.
Yeah. So how many of them's actually working, you know?
Working up to speed, and, you know, things have changed so much in technology in 5 years.
Right. Anything gets 5 years old, you should throw it away.
But I mean,
I mean, as far as
say again,
electronic stuff's concerned.
I'm encouraged in.
I'm not talking about people now. I'm talking about electronic devices.
I would say I'm encouraged by the relationship that we're developing with your budget department, and you know, we're talking about trying to get on cycles where things can be replaced on a regular basis, similar to how you do your own things, and that will take time for us to get there. But,
Yeah, but a child working on a 5-year-old device compared to what is out there today is totally obsolete, and they wouldn't know how to use a new one without being trained, would they?
Maybe not, yeah, because things have changed so much.
But, you know,
Yes,
5
sir.
years old, they know more about these cell phone stuff than I do.
And we are, and I think Kannapolis is doing the same. We do have a bring your own device. So if a child has one at home, they can bring that. So we're trying to find every way we can to use the resources that are available to us.
Yeah.
Okay. Going back to the teacher assistant positions, know whenever Commissioner White was asking earlier about the difference between the EC department, teacher assistants, and just the general teacher assistants, and you said that some of the EC classes, that it's 1-to-1. So if you have a class of 5, it's not a 5, okay. How does that work? I'm unsure.
So, as Dr. Shepherd indicated, if their IEP indicates that they need a 1-to-1,
Okay,
so
I
that
see.
particular student would need a 1-to-1. Not all the students in the
Okay,
class
that's
would
what I
need a
was getting
1-to-1.
confused. Okay. All right, and then what was the name of the program for the transportation of the homeless?
McKinney-Vento.
What was that?
McKinney-Vento.
Okay. And do we know how many students we travel outside the county for? I know you said there's 300.
We can get that information for you,
I'd
but I
like
don't
to
know
know.
off the top of my
I'm
head.
just curious.
Okay.
I want to ask you a question about charter schools. Cabarrus, and I don't know how you get your information from each of these. So if Cabarrus Charter Academy, based on page 79 is what I have. I don't know if you want to flip to that. I don't know, it says 79 there. Our page 79, their page 48.
48 for us.
There you go. Okay, so Cabarrus Charter Academy said at some point in time that they're going to have 594 Cabarrus County students, right?
They said 90% of their capacity.
So when are they going to tell you who they really have and what grades they're going to be in? Because my point would be, of the 594 students, how many of those are currently Cabarrus County students versus, or let's look at the 753 total, okay? How many of those are current Cabarrus County school students versus how many of those are currently homeschooled or in private schools? Because if there's 753, if there's 700 that are coming from Cabarrus County schools, they're already being funded if they're already in school. Now, if they're rising kindergarten, they're not been funded anywhere yet.
Right.
If they're homeschooled, they've not been funded anywhere yet. If they're private school, they've not been funded anywhere yet. So how do you, 753 students, if you think of 25 students per classroom, that's 30 teaching positions. So how will you know that you're losing students so that the increase, sorry, it was 700 something was your projected enrollment increase?
It's about flat,
771.
even, just about.
771? Okay. So, how, is all of your growth being wiped out, which means that all of those 753 are currently funded? Or how are you going to, do you see what I'm getting? I'm trying to figure out how you're going to get justification on the charter school students. Because if they're already being funded, and then money flows with them, that's one thing, then you lose teaching positions. Versus if they're already being funded and you fund a whole 753 students, and then you're keeping teaching positions, which means somewhere around the district, there are going to be smaller class sizes because there's still 30 teachers there, but the students are not there. So I'm trying to figure out,
Let's make it clean
can you
first.
give
and then
more
we can-
information on charter schools and how you get that information?
If we can make it clean first, and then we'll talk about how the variations could occur. If we have 30,000 students right now, we're anticipating 771 additional students next year. Let's assume that the charter schools will take exactly the same number of students away that would equal our growth. So at that point, we would have the same number of students attending our school district next year. But because those students are now attending charter schools, we would have to send a check or multiple checks to various charter schools totaling $1.143 million. So we would have the same number of students in the Cabarrus County schools, but we would be less that amount of money to operate next year. And that's what we're asking you to consider. If we're holding the dollar figure flat, which is what we say we're doing, then we're potentially next year going to have the same number of students, but because we're going to be sending money to charters, we'll have fewer dollars to operate with next year than we had this year, possibly.
Okay, but if we funded the growth,
You're not.
it's a net difference, but you've asked for us to fund the growth.
Yes, if you fund the growth, yes, ma'am, then
Then there's a certain amount that are leaving, and I don't know how many of those are. If you were to grow the 771 and you lost 771, there's something wrong with the math. My logic is not working.
but you're right, if you
My
were to fund
logic is
growth.
not working right.
If you,
It's not, for me, when I read this, it's like we're funding it twice.
Yeah, I thought if we're only
How do
funding
you-
operational, if we're only funding capital, no additional teachers, then how are you losing money if the same number of kids go to charter than stay in the system?
No, but you're funding more than capital, that's the point. It's like, what's the per pupil? $1,500 per child, and that's what we would have to send them.
So the $1,500 is just capital, is just the operational expenses.
Yes.
so if we were to take the 1,579 and multiply it by 771 children, that's $1.2 million. So if those 771 children leave our school and go to the charter school, these are the growth children, not not current children that are in our system, then they would take that $1.2 million of growth with them. And if you fund us $1.2 million of growth, we're in a neutral situation, and we're good.
But what's the allotment of money, whether it's federal, state, or county, that stays in the system that doesn't follow to the charter schools? Isn't there, I thought there was a portion of money, however small.
I'm not aware of any money that would stay here. Federal and
I
state
guess that
go
would be,
directly
there's
to
just the
them.
pure capital.
Yes.
Capital and maintenance and all that would stay with the system.
Not maintenance, capital.
Capital would
Maintenance.
stay with the system and not with the child.
I thought you said it was a pass-through.
We are.
It is so if the growth, so if it's additional students, that is growth, not current students going to the charter school, then wouldn't it just be a simple pass-through rather than you actually losing money?
So if every one of the 753 students turns out to be homeschool students now, let's imagine, and so, but they all live in Cabarrus County.
Right.
And so we would have 30,771 students in our district, and then we would get a check from the charter schools for the 753 students who have now re-entered the system, expecting the local money to be sent to them.
Okay, so it's just the local money going.
Yes. Now, back to Ms. Poole's point, if you were to fund growth, then, in the scenario that I just explained, you have 30,750 students, and the charter schools have 750 students, then our enrollment goes up to 31,500 students, and then the per pupil amount funded to us would be $1,500 times 31,500, and then we would send the charter school money to them, and it would be a pass-through.
Okay.
You have to say and think about this stuff 3 or 4 times before it hits.
So but the pass-through is only local funds.
Okay, so let me explain that. So the way that the state operates is that the state has, in the first year of the charter, they're estimating our increase to be, 771, so we'll be at $30,000. So they give me a planning allotment, and they say, this is what's going to be your money based on 30,771 students. Because they can't determine those numbers either. They do not know how many kids are going to that charter school. Now, previous charter schools, we know, and we can do estimates based on that. But, so I'm holding money in my planning allotment that I know that's going to go to the charter schools. So as soon as they get new, real good numbers, the first or the second month of the school year, they're going to take that money out of my planning allotment and they're going to move it over to the charter school. But we also get growth for the state. So the state says you're going to have 771 more students, so we're going to give you $3 million more. But of that $3 million more, we're going to take 1.5 because only part of those students are growing in Cabarrus County schools, and the other part are going to charter school. So we're not in a negative situation in the state. The state truly does hold us harmless with charter schools. They just move the money.
Well, they hold us harmless with the state average, but what we have shown to our community is that those schools typically draw the students that are less expensive to educate, that don't need extra services. So we're sending them. Sorry.
Higher profit margin.
Right, that's exactly right. So if the state average is 7,000, then Ms. Klutz has figures to show that some students are educated for $5,000. And that's where the $2,000 profit margin comes in, but we're left with the students then that are more expensive. And so there's a lot of concern, and we could spend a whole hour talking on the effects of charter schools on public education. But the bottom line is I'm responsible for looking after the good of all children in this county, and I accept that challenge and think students should stay in the public schools so we can take care of them.
If you go to page 48 in ours, which is there, page 17, I believe. I'm just trying to get, and I don't know, maybe it's the one before that too also, but okay, top part says local funding, local current expense funding to continue to operate. And that's that first section, 1 through 6. equals that dollar amount. Right?
Right.
What page number is that for us?
It's page 17.
Page 17 in yours.
Okay.
Okay, so first of all, will you provide to us let's see. Okay, number 1 is supplements. Okay. County's cost of living is, the COLA that we're doing for our staff is 1.5%.
Okay.
Right? So can you provide us the numbers for item number 1 at 1.5%, not 2.5%?
Yes, ma'am.
And then item number 2, give us the dollar amount for 1%. I mean, or it's going to be 0. I mean, it depends on which one comes through, but if the governor's budget comes through and it's 1%, then that's the number that Kannapolis presented, and it's the number that's mostly talked about, other than, of course, the Senate's just at 0. It's easy just to eliminate it completely.
Ms. Close, did you not provide that information to us?
I provided that information, but I used the 2.5%. We've done this a time or two, but I'll make sure that it's back at the 1%.
I don't have a calculator with me.
That's the money we placed in contingency,
Right.
pending the decisions
Right.
that were made. But
Right.
you did do 2.5 and not 1%?
I did 2.5 yesterday, the one that I sent Monday.
What we've got
I see
in,
the budget.
It can be easily modified to 1%.
Maybe the
or
question is
1.5%.
actually over here, not over there, which is fine, as long as I can make sure which
Or
one
we
you
can
have
work
in
it
there.
out, whatever it is.
It's-
For Duke Power, and I'm probably, I don't know, maybe I just don't remember completely, but they asked for a rate increase, which is not always granted.
Right.
So, they asked for 9.6%, and I'm trying to remember what I've seen in the media about how the Utility Commission was leaning on that. And part of me says that they were leaning not to give them 9.6%, or they weren't going to give them what they asked for, but I don't know what that was. And I don't know if anybody has any feedback on that.
I do know that what's in the contingency for both school systems is the 1% match on the locally funded and the 1.5% on the supplements. And that totals $352,000. And that is earmarked in the contingency.
Okay.
It's in your contingency should you choose to do that if the state factor.
Okay.
Right.
Well,
And can you provide those numbers to Kelly so she can verify them?
Yes, I can.
The 1.5% for the COLA is on the supplement, which is all local dollars. That's not a state issue. The supplement is paid locally.
Right.
So, if we were to do the same for the school system employees that we're doing for our employees, then that would be 1.5% on the supplement.
He's going to go look it up.
So, number 2 has to do with our locally paid staff, and we got an update on that today. Actually, I don't know that your numbers changed. I think Kannapolis' numbers changed. Locally paid staff, currently Cabarrus County pays 21 teaching positions. Are those classroom teachers? Do you have any idea?
Most of those are EC teachers.
Most of those are EC teachers. Administration, are those at the education center, or are they assistant principals?
Assistant principals.
Assistant principals, and that's because the state funds based on an ADM number that keeps going up.
And the state doesn't fund but about 1 AP per school. And we have 2 in most schools and sometimes 3 in the larger schools. So
So a high school of 1,400, the state says you need 1 principal and 1 assistant principal.
I would need to look at that formula, but during the budget cuts, they just continued to cut at that pot of money. The cabinet, the central office administration, the school administration, all of those, and so that number has increased to the number of per pupils that we allocate, but the funding has decreased over the years.
No, I was just trying to make a point that the state feels like a high school could operate with 1 principal and 1 assistant principal for many of our high schools. Some of the bigger ones, Robinson's a bigger one, they get 2 assistant principals. Okay, so Oh, I'm sorry, assistant principals are separate, my bad.
Sorry.
No,
You're
that's
right-
okay,
you're
I
right,
was reading the
no.
wrong line. So administration, 13 administration, those must be the Ed Center.
Right,
I'm
they
sorry.
are. Sorry.
23 assistant principals are funded locally.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Same scenario. Clerical and custodial, the county funds 179 clerical and custodial. So state doesn't think we need clerical and custodial people?
That's another significant pot that the state chose to cut through the budget cuts. So a significant cut to that pot of money. Then the ARA funds came to us, and we had to move all of our clerical custodial to ARA funds, and then we had to move them back because the ARA funds then went away. So it's just a puzzle trying to piece the funding sources together. But yes, the allotment for clerical and custodial is extremely low. There's no way we could pay.
So you need 1 or 2 custodians to handle our larger schools? That's point of
I
view
would
from
say
the
that the state funds less than 50% of the clerical custodial.
We only fund 1 teacher assistant, according to this.
Locally.
That's what I mean. Locally, we
Yes.
fund 1.
Locally, we fund 1, but all of our
EC
teacher
again,
assistants.
or you don't know?
This one was, I believe, it was our kindergarten class at Long, because we only have 1.
While we're on that subject, let me clarify something that I said earlier, and I want to make sure we're clear. I want our folks who are watching to know that we're not cutting any services to exceptional children. EC teacher assistants will not be cut. That's a federal requirement.
And that's a good note for everybody to know. Facilities and grounds. We fund 57 skilled trades positions to take care of our buildings and our grounds, which that one actually makes a little bit of sense for us because we have to provide facilities and grounds. So that makes sense that would be, the state wouldn't pick up those employees and that we would have to. And then there's 6 technology, so is that in the technology department?
Yes, that's your skilled trades. There's still a CTO, and then there's a clerical person too over there, and those are in the other corresponding areas. But yes, that's our
So we
technology.
Cabarrus County funds 300 positions with Cabarrus County Schools, based on your numbers, and not counting the supplements, which is a local expense. That's over $13 million that's paid for salaries by Cabarrus County.
Absolutely. And we're very thankful for everyone.
Take the supplements out. I mean, the supplements, total of almost $19.5 million. Take the supplements out, which is a little over $6 million. There are actual people working to the tune of $13 million local. I just think that's something people need to understand. As you mentioned, Commissioner Morris, we've all gotten emails about teacher assistants, and so I had requested information based on the locally funded positions because we do fund a lot of positions, and it does help the system to operate. I mean, you can't operate without clerical and custodial. You just can't. You can't operate, I don't think you can operate a lot of the schools without assistant principals. And I know for a fact, an IEP is an individualized education plan. I know for a fact that if you have certain EC students, if they don't have somebody with them, you won't get through the day. You won't get through an hour. I don't know, you get through some of them, you wouldn't get through 10 minutes with them. I mean, so they are just invaluable as far as I'm concerned. I want to make sure people listening get to see that. This would be a staff question, for the expected growth of 771 students, are we suggesting that we fund those at the current ADM, or are we suggesting flat funding and not funding any of those increased number of students?
The proposed budget is flat on current.
Dollar?
However, you have $1.8 million in your contingency that you have flexibility to use for anything you want to use it for. And we did not specify whenever we wanted you guys to have that opportunity.
And I'm still having a little, I mean, I'm understanding better about charter schools. It seems to me like there's got to be some way to identify how many of those are current students and how many, which means the funding would go with them versus how many of those are new. And I don't know how you do that at this point in time. But, I mean, if I were a charter school, I would tell you I'm getting 90% of my students and you're going to wait till I send you a bill, and that's what you do. You've said that before. You get a bill every month.
I do.
For the list of students' names, and you try to verify those are actually living in Cabarrus County addresses, and then you send the check. And then the next month, if there's less, then they get less.
Exactly.
If charter school opens, and after the second month, 20 of those students decide they really don't like the charter school and they want to come back to Cabarrus County schools, charter school keep all the state and federal money?
They keep all the state and federal money if they apply for federal money. Now, the federal money doesn't go to them automatically.
So we'll say they keep all the state
So they
money.
keep all the state money after the second
And
month.
they come back, and Cabarrus County schools would educate them.
Exactly.
And the only difference is you would keep the local money because you would be able to verify that on a monthly basis. Can we request, they've already left, can we request of Kannapolis City Schools their number of charter students? Because that's nowhere in their budget that they're, and they may not have that many, I don't know. But can we request and see how that impacts them? I'd like to be able to compare both.
Do you know if he's giving you anything?
And then if you'll go back one page to page 47. And I know you said we're going to address that, so I'm just going to lead right into it.
What page?
Parth, go back one page to 47, please.
Is that this one?
Which is your 16. School nurses. There's a line in there for school nurses, and I know we're going to talk about school nurses. I don't know if that's today or if that's tomorrow. But we've moved all the school nurses out of the school systems and put them with the Health Alliance. So we're no longer doing pass-through dollars.
Okay, let me show you what I've got on school nurses. Okay. And I think, don't they have this as a handout?
Nope.
So they don't have to worry about that being so small.
It's not a handout.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Well, Cabarrus County is one of 15 counties that has 2 school systems. And by law, we are required to fund each system equally regarding the current expense funding. That calculation has become quite problematic due to the school nurse funding, which is funded by schools instead of by ADM, because I think we have like one per school. And so in the past, we haven't been getting credit for the whole amount that we've been paying for school nurses. If you'll notice on this chart, see the 793 and the 136, that's what has currently been kind of like allocated to the schools and then goes to the Health Alliance.
Where's 793 and
Okay, you
130?
see
You
the
have a
orange,
mouse pointer that will move, that you, there you go. If you
There you
can
go.
point where we need to see, I appreciate it.
right there is where we're
Okay.
looking at. Okay, that's what has been, that's what's in our budget right this minute. If we put that in there for the school nurses, in that line. However, the total that we're giving to the school nurses is that number, $1,908,000. And so what I wanted to consider is, you see if we take the school nurses out, which is why that's highlighted, you see in that column right there, school nurses are out. If we did that, we would need to give Kannapolis $31,690 so that the numbers to that point would be even in terms of funding at $1,554.03 for each system. Then in terms of what we would present as our true ADM is we would add the school nurses at the $1,908,000 and come up with the total funding of $55 million, and that brings the total to $1,608.87. What that does is it changes your your funding per pupil by 2812.
What that does is it just moves moves all of the funding for school nurses directly into Cabarrus Health Alliance's budget, so it's no longer a pass-through. You already did that in a sense, this is just taking it and actually.
Well, then my question is, how do we go from an $800 or $900,000 expense to a $1.9 million expense?
Because, unbeknownst to me until recently, we had been giving the Health Alliance funding for school
Oh, I know,
nurses
never mind,
separate
okay.
and apart from this. And because of the way we did it, we were only getting credit for the part of it.
No, I understand.
Where if we look at the whole amount that's going to
Can you-
CHA
Can
on
you
behalf of school
can you
nurses.
simplify that in English terms? From what I understand was when we started the program, the schools that were in existence at the time that we started the school nurse program were being funded through the schools. As a new school was added, that was being paid by the county and not with additional dollars. That's how the discrepancy came in. And now so it's the same amount of money, it's just, that was the difference. As the additional schools came online, they got funded by the county and not through the school system.
Well, those two line items, 793, 633,
Yeah.
139, 585, represent two of the three pots of money that funded school nurses.
Yeah.
Because this shows up in the schools, the pot that we sent directly to the Health Alliance just didn't show up.
Right,
Okay.
right. And so
So-
that was 978,572, which is the difference in the 793 and 136, which totals 930,000, and the 1,000,009. So there was 978,572 that we weren't getting credit for. And that's why if we pull it out and do it this way, although we got to marry and get Kannapolis right, that makes our calculations much less problematic. And what we would do in the future is just put the whole amount that we're giving on behalf of school nurses into the calculation.
So the whole amount will show up in the Health Alliance's budget, but none of it will show up in the two K-12 budgets. I don't know if is there a reason why we need to show it in, that we need to show the school nurses as part of the school system's budget?
Pam, are you
Does
aware of
that
this?
make sense? So, I mean, are we funding the school systems? It looks like we were funding 1582.54, but then we pulled out the school nurses. So now the number is 1558.03, which is purely a representation of school nurses. But then you've added that other back in, so I don't know, what is the ADM amount that we are truly funding the two school systems? Because we're not comparing to apples, we're not comparing the same thing, because the school nurses, if I looked at this, I would say, well, you cut our funding. You cut our per pupil funding because it went down. When in reality, we've just shifted the money out of the school system, but
that's-
everything else has been held the same.
And that's why it's showing back up in the total calculation over there. It's just being, instead of being a pass-through payment, it's going directly to the health department. So the 1.9 is showing back up in that. to
So
make up the
we're
50.
funding, the proposed budget has the two school systems at 1554.03, or the two school systems at 1608.87 per pupil.
If you add the school nurses back in, then it would be the higher number.
Okay.
Monetarily, it's 1554.03 that they have cash for.
Without the 31,000 though.
Right.
Right now, we need to add the 31,000, and that would put it at 1554, not counting the school nurses. When you count the school nurses, it's 1608.87.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
y'all, you get that?
Yeah, I do. There's just one piece of information I think you need to know. It doesn't matter to us at all, I don't believe. If you fund this way, if you fund outside of the school system and the dollars do not literally come to the school system and then are allocated by the school system, it's not, those dollars will not show up in the per pupil calculations that in DPI statistics. So you're right, it will show a lower number, so that'll
we
be a
go down.
reason that our numbers and Pam's numbers will not match. So, yes, but we're getting the service, it doesn't matter to us. But if you're talking about credit for something, it may matter.
Well, I'm not worried about credit.
I'm not
The
worried
reason
about
that I
credit.
wanted to move it,
I get enough credit for bad things.
there you go. The reason I thought it was important to move it
Just one more?
purely to the Health Alliance is that that's who they're accountable to, is the Health Alliance, first of all. Second of all, if there is a smallpox outbreak in Cabarrus County, that's the front line of defense. And they're not going to, you guys aren't going to be telling those school nurses what to do. The Health Alliance is going to tell them what to do. I mean, you don't technically tell them what to do now. The Health Alliance you've been just moving the money through. And my point would be, I don't want to see, well, we've decreased the per pupil amount as a result of the school nurses. Because, as you just said, everybody's still getting a service. School nurses are going to benefit, I think, because of their health care. Some of them will, by being at the Health Alliance. And it's a cleaner process to have them there. Because that's their line of defense. Like I said, they're going to pull them in. If there's ever an emergency, those folks are working. It doesn't matter that it's, 6 hours that they work at schools? Is that right? 6.5 hours they work at school. That doesn't, yes, ma'am.
Kelly, when you have to give your ADM figure over to the charter schools, and we don't physically give you that money for those school nurses, but we use it in your calculation of your ADM, it's burning you, isn't it?
It's, the way that you have it now, we're going to have a lower calculation.
Correct. I'm talking about,
So
if we
help.
don't move that, you're going to give away money that
exactly.
you never touched and never was in your pocket to start with.
So that would be another reason to make sure we pull it out, so
It is better to
that
pull
the
it
money
out.
that you're paying, you're not giving charter schools this $54.
And we'll remember to report when we're doing reports on per pupil comparisons to add $55 to the figure.
Yeah, it ends up being
Yeah.
about
Well,
a $35,000
you just want-
question.
So then the statistics would still show. the
No, you want to
contribution.
make, I think what you want to do is you want to show that 1554, and as far as funding charter schools, you want to make sure whatever number they're pulling up from DPI's website shows that 1554, so that you're not sharing.
Right, and I'll see Rebecca Troutman
make
on
sense?
Friday, and I'm going to have a conversation with her about this whole process of how this works, because all the numbers that Ann pulled off the website today are just all over the place.
Depending on what chart you looked at, it was a whole different number.
And they're all for
a lot of
2012, but
counties.
they don't necessarily
As far as
match.
the-
And to see whether that is a significant, but I wanted to run it by her of what we're looking at doing, but if their schools are not receiving that money and they're having to give it to charter schools, they're being penalized. And when Ann and I had the conversation today, this seems to be the cleaner way of what truly goes into their pocket. And if you compare Cabarrus to Union or whomever you compare us to, school nurses are not part of our funding, if it's part of their funding. Some people include debt service might be part of their funding and not our funding. You can't truly just walk up to another school system or a county and do a dollar for dollar comparison until you sit down and go down line by line and say, what do you have in your number versus what do we have in our number? And that's what I want to talk to Rebecca about, because if there's something that we're doing like on the AFIR and we report our annual information that makes those numbers show up with DPI, what do we need to do to be doing it the right way? Because they're extracting them from somebody, I'm just not sure who.
And the problem would be that if we're not including something and somebody else is including something, the numbers, you can't really compare them because
It's
they're not.
apples and oranges, yes. you're
Yeah,
right.
they're not similar, so it's really hard to compare the school districts. If you look at local, now maybe state funding and federal funding, there's a better comparison. I mean, those might be cleaner, but if we're looking at things like that, if somebody's including debt service, then obviously their number's going to be a whole lot higher. I mean, we could include that and blow the top off of it.
But statutorily, if you read the one of the statutes that I put into your file, what is considered current expense is fines and forfeitures, local supplement school tax, and what the county gives to them. We've never put fine and forfeitures in our number. We don't have a local supplement school tax. When you go look at statistics, you don't know whether they have that in there or they don't have it in there. So there's not a really good, somebody needs to be clear on what makes up
Right.
that per pupil number, so that when you're trying to be compared to what everybody else is doing, what are we comparing?
Right.
And how do we get a simple answer for that?
So we don't know what Union County has in their per pupil expense. compared to us. So it's not a fair comparison.
I'd have to ask Ann, because she's done some research on that.
Yeah, and it is hard. What I did was I took it off their budget ordinance to
I
take a
understand,
look at it. But it is very difficult to compare one to the other in terms of what.
So you don't know if you're comparing apples with apples.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's why you would think on something as important as this, that the state would say, here's the data, every LEA submit, we need this, this, and this, and here's the pieces, that could be different, to make sure you're comparing apples to apples.
So with a DPI, so we do report fines and forfeitures, so, and that is consistent among the LEAs. So there's a format.
Then that may be why we can't match our per pupil number to the state's per pupil number.
Exactly, exactly.
Right.
But
So
certainly.
you knew that, but we don't know that, so there's,
And I don't know what's in the county budget ordinance and what exactly the items that we just talked about, how the nurses are or not, whether it's a flow-through or if it's a pass. Certainly there are, I think the LEA's reporting is consistent with the structure that we have.
Okay, well, the chart that you have, your 14, our 45, has local as 151865.
45.
I'm sorry to jump around.
You want our 45?
Yes.
On our 45, their 14, it has 151865, that's highlighted in yellow. And then when I go back to this one that we just looked at, I'm sorry, that you gave to us, 155403.
So we're looking at different years. We can only
Okay,
report.
so if I go back to 12,
We don't have.
okay, which we don't have in here. That's what I was trying to look and make sure,
Yeah.
because I got you.
I did the same thing.
Okay.
So DPI, we can't access the exact per pupil information until the fiscal year's ended.
Right.
And then they'll compile that.
So in the 151865 there, that includes your fines and forfeitures?
It does.
It does.
It does.
Is that information, Pam, that's of any use to us for you to make sure how the numbers are
we
jihad?
obtained that from our office and from our finance office to incorporate onto our schedule. I got it right around 4 o'clock today, so we didn't get a
Okay.
chance to incorporate it because we were trying to see if we could come back to that number that was being reported. Because with Kannapolis, we definitely confirmed that it was a blend of what Rowan gives and what we give, so we were like, forget it.
Right, and that I did know, and that's why I asked what the 80/20 is their split, because, it's obviously it's different between two counties. but-
Yeah, we're trying to learn and understand what we're comparing.
And
Well, it's hard to, really, our budget's bad, y'all's budget is ridiculous, nothing personal. But it really is hard to figure out the school's budget, and you know as well as I do, you have this conversation, I don't, you have these conversations with decision makers and say, well, okay, this is out of this pot, this is out of this pot doesn't share with this pot, and by the way, we're spending this out of here. And it can be, I don't know, what do you have, 5, 6, 7 different areas of money, and you have to figure out more. I'm sorry, how many do you have? Do you have any idea? Pick a number.
Probably 20 state, and then you have every federal PRC. So, probably 50.
So there's all these different pots of money, and you might recognize that this is a really important need, but this pot doesn't have anything left in it, and you got money over here, but this one you can't use for that, and y'all's budget is, like I said, I think ours is bad, it's tough, that's actually not so bad to look at this time, but, it's hard to understand everything that goes into the budgets and try to match them up and see what the statistics are, so. I don't mean to belabor all of that, but again, and you heard me say that with Kannapolis, we try to ask questions that are gonna help people who are not here in the room with us, because everybody in this room is either your employee or our employee. And so we want to make sure people can understand everything that's out there, so. Commissioners, do you have other questions?
I don't have any other questions, but I two comments and I don't mean to point, sorry. It's interesting is if the state legislature would do what they were lawfully required to do in regards to lottery funds, we'd be having a lot different conversation.
Absolutely.
It's sad that the purpose of which that was thrown down everybody's throats, it's not being used for, and we're having to try to figure out what we're going to do.
And state funding formulas, add that to that. I mean, it's just.
It's ridiculous.
Yes.
Second is, and I don't know the answer to this, is if Mr. Whitkey can help us understand why a local charter school is getting built in such a quicker fashion, and as opposed to what we have to, what we choose to build, because the time that charter school has been pulled out of the ground and is going to be open for business is light years ahead of what we can build a building for. And I cannot imagine that the quality of construction is equal and the longevity of that building is going to be equal to what we do. And I think it's going to be, if it hasn't been addressed to y'all, it's going to come addressed to y'all as to why we can't build schools in that fashion. And I think that the dynamics, my gut feeling is the dynamics that DPI is putting on them as to what they put on Cabarrus County or public school systems is completely different, the construction standards. And I think that I would encourage y'all to address it so that everybody knows why there is a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for all you do for us.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. I'm not certain how much headway we made on understanding some of the intricacies of your budget, but it's always enlightening to better understand the numbers. I like the numbers, so it's always enlightening to learn more. Thank you all.
One good
Yes, sir.
thing, and that is I appreciate the good dialogue, the excellent fielding of questions from commissioners. You know, it's heartfelt, genuine, that we really are in this together, trying to figure out a way to make it better. And I appreciate all that you try to do. Thank you.
Thank you all. Commissioners, there we go. Next, we have general discussion. Do you need to take a quick break? Let's take a quick 10 minutes. Let's take a 10-minute break.